Tetzaveh, you shall command. God's trumpet call presents. 8th reading from the Book of Exodus. 20th reading from the Book of Torah. Outline of Torah portion. Olive oil for the menorah. Exodus chapter 27 verse 20 to 21. In the last week Parsha we discussed about the instructions Adonai gave to make the 7-branch lampstand. In this Parsha we find Adonai's instructions regarding the oil for the lamps of the menorah. You are to order the people of Israel to bring you pure oil of pounded olives for the light, and to keep the lamps burning continually. Exodus chapter 27 verse 30. Menorah was to burn continually day and night. Priests had to tend and light the 7 lamps of the menorah. Torah says the olive oil used for the menorah was to be beaten. The process involved beating olives in a mortar with pestle. The paste was then passed through a strainer and separated into oil. This method produced the clearest and best refined olive oil, which resulted in minimum amount of smoke. Ordinary Israelites provided the oil for the menorah, but any Israelite could not enter the tabernacle to present the olive oil. Only the priests had access to the tabernacle. The priest became the intermediary between children of Israel and God. God also instructed that the lamps of the menorah must burn continually. Aharon and his sons were to tend it from evening until morning before Adonai. Likewise, we too cannot enter into God's presence directly, and that is why Yeshua HaMashiach became our high priest, our intermediary between us and God, who intercedes for us day and night in the heavenly temple. Among many other useful benefits of olive oil, it is also used for anointing purposes too. Summoning of Aaron and his sons. Exodus chapter 28 verse 1. You are to summon your brother Aharon and his sons to come from among the people of Israel to you, so that they can serve me as Kohanim. Aharon and his sons, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. Exodus chapter 28 verse 1. Out of the nations God selected Israel. From Israel he selected the tribe of Levi. And of the tribe of Levi he chose Aharon. Hebrew word for priest is Kohen. Adonai chose Aharon and his descendants to serve him as Kohanim. They are the priestly clan, a subset within Levi. Biblical priesthood was passed on through families. They did not undertake vows of celibacy, so they are different from various other priesthoods known to Christianity. During the time of the tabernacle or the temple period, they were responsible for worship services. First, they served in the tabernacle and then in the holy temples in Jerusalem. They offered the sacrifices, took care of the altar fire, tend the menorah, burned the sacred incense, baked the bread of the presence. They were teachers of the Torah and bearers of tradition. They were involved in the diagnosis of skin disease known as Tetzaveh. They were given 24 gifts. Kohanim still retain their priestly status in Judaism. They are still subject to special restrictions and laws of Torah that apply to biblical priesthood. They are given the first aliyah on the Sabbath and other days when the Torah is read in public, which is considered an honor. They are also required to recite a special blessing over the congregation in every morning prayer and in additional prayers. They redeem firstborn Israelites. Males avoid contact with the dead. Males may not marry certain women, including a divorcee and a convert. Vestments for the priests. Exodus chapter 28, verse 2 to 5. You shall make holy garments for Aaron and your brother for glory and for beauty. Exodus chapter 28, verse 2. Children of Israel received specific instructions from Adonai to make special vestments for Aaron and his sons. They were to be made by the craftsman to whom Adonai has given the spirit of wisdom to do so. This commandment was to make for Aaron holy garments, and they are to express glory and beauty. Holy garments meaning that they be separated, set apart for the purpose of serving God in the tabernacle. They were not to be used ordinarily, lightly, or in any way for any other purpose other than in the service in the tabernacle. The vestments were not only holy, but also they were vestments for glory. To glorify God means to reveal His greatness and to give Him the honor He is worthy of. The vestments were to reflect on Lord's glory and His greatness. In this parsha, the laws of the priestly garments teach us an important lesson about clothing. Adonai's instructions were specific. What must be worn, who must make them, and how. It indicates that how we dress matters to Him. Yes, He sees our heart, yet outward appearance matters too, especially when we attend worship services, messianic congregations. We need to dress modestly and appropriately. The ephod. They are to make the ritual vest of gold, of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and of finely woven linen, crafted by a skilled artisan. Exodus chapter 28, verse 6. The word ephod is a direct translation of the Hebrew word ephod. During Bible times, it was a religious vestment. It was a garment that Adonai commanded to make for Aaron, and the garments were to be set apart for serving God, expressing dignity and splendor. It was like an apron, and its shoulder straps worn backward over the priest's tunic. The same fabric and colors that was used for the curtains of the tabernacle were used. It made a connection between the high priest and the tabernacle. To each shoulder pad were attached an onyx stone framed in a gold setting. The stones rested on the shoulders of the high priest. On one stone, the names of 6 of the tribes, and on the other, the names of the other 6 tribes were engraved. The stones were called stones of memorial for the sons of Israel. Exodus chapter 28, verse 12. The purpose was that high priest could carry the names of the tribes of Israel on his shoulders when he ministered before the Lord. According to Rashi, stones were there so that the names of the 12 tribes were visible before God. Also, it helped the high priest to remember that he was representing all Israel before God. In our homes, the father or the head of the house is like the priest over that family. It is his responsibility to carry the names of each of his children before God in prayer daily. The breastplate. Make a breastplate for judging. Have it crafted by a skilled artisan. Make it like the work of the ritual vest. Make it of gold. blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and finely woven linen. Then fold double it to be a square, a handspan by a handspan. Exodus chapter 28, verse 15 to 16. The breastplate consisted of a rectangular piece of fabric, 2 zeras long and 1 zeras wide. When folded over, it created a square cloth pouch. A zeres is half a cubit, approximately 9.5 inches. Fabric was fashioned from 5 materials: gold, flattened and cut into thread-like strands; wool dyed tachelet for blue; wool dyed argamon for purple; and wool dyed scarlet; and linen. The breastplate lay on the high priest's chest, fixed in place by means of a series of chains, rings, and tachelet threads, which secured it to the ephod, the priestly apron. On the front, there were 12 beautiful precious stones set into gold casings were embedded into the breastplate. Upon the 12 precious stones were inscribed the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. The gems were arranged in 4 rows and 3 columns. Also, the breastplate contained the names of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the words Shiveti Yeshurun, tribes of Jeshurun, featuring the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The 12 precious stones of the breastplate, on which the names of the 12 tribes were engraved, was a visual reminder that the high priest represented all of Israel. Exodus chapter 28, verse 29. It also indicates that to Adonai, all 12 tribes of Israel are precious and important to him. Urim and Thummim. Exodus chapter 28, verse 30. You are to put the Urim and Thummim in the breastplate for judging. They will be over Aaron's heart when he goes into the presence of Adonai. Thus, Aharon will always have the means for making decisions for the people of Israel over his heart when he is in the presence of Adonai. The breastplate of the high priest contained 2 special gemstones called Urim and Thummim, or lights and perfections. Exodus chapter 28, verse 30, Leviticus chapter 8, verse 8, Numbers chapter 27, verse 21, and Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 8. These stones were used to discern the will of God in some cases. Some claim that the Shekinah would cause the Urim and Thummim to light up and shine upon the 12 gemstones that represented the 12 tribes of Israel, as each stone was inscribed with the name of a tribe of Israel. That letters illuminated would reveal an answer to a question posed by the high priest. Other priestly garments. Robe. You are to make the robe for the ritual vest entirely of blue. Exodus chapter 28, verse 31. The special robe worn by the high priest was called the robe of the ephod. It wasn't one piece with the ephod, but because the two were attached. The ephod was worn over the top of the robe and belted to it. Robe was seamless, with a woven binding all around its opening for the head, and it was not to tear. The blue color of the robe was obtained from a rare and expensive dye called tachelet. To the hem of the garment was attached balls of cloth shaped like pomegranates of blue, purple, and scarlet, alternating with small golden bells all around its hem. The bells made a ringing sound when the high priest walked. Headgear. You are to make an ornament of pure gold and engrave on it as on a seal, set apart for Adonai. Exodus chapter 28, verse 36. Priest and high priest covered their heads during the service in the tabernacle. Priests used a linen scarf, which was wound around the head to form a turban. In addition to the turban, the high priest wore a golden plate upon which was inscribed, "Holy to the Lord." It was fastened to the turban with a blue cord on the front of the turban. This ornament was always to be on his forehead, so that the gifts for Adonai will be accepted by him. The high priest wore the special garments described above in addition to his priestly vestments. Priests wore only a white linen tunic, turban, sash, and breeches. Sash was out of same colored thread that was used to weave the curtains of the tabernacle. It was a long thin strip of the colorful cloth wound around about the waist several times to form a cummerbund. Orthodox married Jewish women cover their heads as a sign that they are married and they are under their husband's authority. It was this practice that the Apostle Paul addressed in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 10. And Jewish men wear hats to indicate God's authority over them. Covering the head is a mark of respect for God and may remind the wearer of God's presence. The turban worn by the priests in the temple may have a similar function. Consecration of the priests. Here is what you are to do to consecrate them for ministry to me in the office of Kohen. Exodus chapter 29, verse 1. Adonai gave instructions for the inauguration ceremony of the priesthood of Aharon and his sons. The purpose of this ceremony was to set apart Aaron and his sons to minister to Adonai in the office of Kohen. The ceremony involved several long, detailed, and complex sacrifices and rituals and lasted for 7 days. Ingredients needed for consecration: 1 young bull and 2 rams without blemish. Consecration couldn't happen without shedding sacrificial blood. Unleavened bread, unleavened cakes. Consecration couldn't happen without true fellowship with God. Aaron and his sons were brought to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and they were washed with water, a process of cleansing. After the cleansing, they had to put on garments made according to the instruction given by Adonai. Aaron was to set apart as high priest from the other priests. He was anointed with oil, which was poured over his head. Thereafter, a sin offering, a burnt offering, consecration offering, and a wave offering was made to Adonai. Each sacrifice and ritual at the inauguration ceremony was to either consecrate, set apart, or to ritually purify the priest. Ritual purification is by which the priests become ritually fit to enter the tabernacle and perform the services. A priest must be both ritually fit and set apart for Adonai. In Bible times, kings too were anointed with oil to set them apart for their office. King of Israel was also titled Anointed One. Anointed One in Hebrew is Mashiach, in Aramaic Messiah, and in Greek Christos, and in English Christ. When we speak about Jesus Christ, we speak of Jesus the Anointed One, Yeshua HaMashiach, Yeshua the King. Daily offerings. Now this is what you are to offer on the altar: 2 lambs, a year old, regularly every day. Exodus chapter 29, verse 38. Adonai ordained a daily worship service in the tabernacle. After the ceremony of consecration, the priest continued with the daily sacrifices. The daily sacrifices was called continual burnt offering. Two male lambs were offered as burnt offerings by the priest daily. First lamb sacrifice took place early morning. It was placed on the altar fire as the first sacrifice of the day. It was left to burn throughout the day. Any other sacrifice made after that was placed on top of it. When it was time to conclude the tabernacle service, the priest sacrificed the second lamb and placed it onto the remains of the sacrifices on the altar fire. The second lamb was left to burn on the altar throughout the night. The following morning, ashes were removed from the altar and a new lamb was slaughtered and placed on the altar, continuing the process daily before the Lord. A drink offering refers to the wine given to God as a sacrifice. It was the responsibility of the priest to perform the services every day. Altar of incense. You are to make an altar on which to burn incense. Make it of acacia wood. Exodus chapter 30 verse 1. Adonai commanded to make an altar to burn incense on. It was to be made of acacia wood and overlaid with gold. Its top, all around its sides, and its horns, and put around it a molding of gold. It was 18 inches square and 3 feet high. Like the ark, the table, and the altar of burnt offerings, the incense altar was to be fitted with rings, 2 gold rings for it under its molding at the 2 corners on both sides, so that carrying poles could be inserted through them. Poles are to be made from acacia wood and overlaid with gold. It was to be placed before the veil, before the ark of the testimony. It stood outside the veil in the holy place, not in the Holy of Holies, close to the ark of the covenant, yet separated by the veil. Aharon and other priests after him burnt fragrant incense on it every morning, when he prepares the lamps and when he lights the lamps at dusk. Revelation chapter 5 verse 8 states, each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people. With the incense, our prayers ascend to heaven. The ministry at the altar of incense show how important believers must come to Adonai continually and consistently in prayer. Revelation chapter 8 verse 3 to 4. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from angels' hand. It was called the altar of incense. Torah prohibited to offer strange incense on it. Burnt offerings, grain offerings, or drink offerings was never placed upon it. In Exodus chapter 30, verse 34 to 38, the Torah gives a special recipe for making the incense, but it is only for the purpose of the priestly service in the tabernacle. Anyone who uses it for any other purpose will be cut off. The incense of the tabernacle is holy and for use only in the tabernacle. Upon the horns that were attached to each of the 4 corners of the altar, the blood of the sin offering would be smeared by the high priest prior to his once per year entry into the Holy of Holies.